Often, what I think leaders are confusing right now is the idea that if you give everybody access, it's the same as getting everyone to the place of being AI literate. Time saved is just table stakes. But then, much like money, time has to be reinvested in order to make it actually grow, right? And so, what are we doing with that 4.5 hours? Are we putting it into higher order work?
In 2026, shielding $100 million to $1 billion enterprise from systemic operational inertia requires looking past superficial software hype to really implement unified board-level oversight, active communities of practice.
Dig into the actual work that your people are doing and use AI for that. And then you'll start to see some of the challenges, some of the opportunities.
Hi everyone, this is Maheen and welcome to the CanadianSME Small Business Podcast. Today we are breaking down the structural governance of enterprise AI deployment, moving past fragmented operational pilots to build coordinated roadmap strategies and evaluating cognitive tech literacy across mid-market teams. Because in 2026, shielding $100 million to $1 billion enterprise from systemic operational inertia, it requires looking past superficial software hype to really implement unified board level oversight, repeatable corporate training guardrails, and active communities of practice. Joining us is Susan Diaz, the founder and CEO of Northlight AI and a leading Canadian AI literacy expert. Susan is an elite change management strategist, author, and researcher who helps mid-sized executive teams transition from being AI curious to completely AI literate. She teaches AI forward marketing at the York University School of Continuing Studies, hosts the AI Literacy for Entrepreneurs podcast, and runs the AI Power Circle Implementation Mastermind. She is the author of the content marketing favorite, UN Boring, and her brand new landmark book, Swan Dive Backwards. Lots to unpack and uncover with our guest today. So without further ado, let's dive in and welcome Susan. Susan, it's an absolute pleasure to having you on the show today. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm great, Maheen. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to speak to your audience.
Absolutely. We are as excited as well. And we'd love to open our discussion by something I highlighted in my intro as well, Susan. How do we move from fragmented software pilots to coordinated roadmap strategies? Because despite the continuous stream of hyperinflated media noise, the actual production-ready corporate AI implementation across the mid-market is moving substantially slower, is what we noticed, than most industry insiders care to admit. Tell us, why do mid-market AI projects stall, and how can leaders turn scattered pilots into a unified roadmap?
I like that question. So I think one of the reasons why it's stalling is potentially the fact that people are looking at AI as just a technology thing. You're thinking about it as, we give everybody a license. So, for example, a lot of companies of this size would potentially be in the Microsoft suite for reasons of security and, keeping it inside that thing, they would be probably using Copilot. So often what I think leaders are confusing right now is the idea that if you give everybody access, it's the same as getting everyone to the place of being AI literate. And so a Copilot license does not an AI literate human being make, is what I would say. And maybe the solution to that is to start thinking in terms of workflow and to start thinking in terms of what it is that you yourself are trying to achieve as a company, as a department, as an individual. And so I think it's really a change management and a leadership gap rather than, a tool gap, in my opinion.
That's amazing. That's a great key insight, actually, because successful AI adoption starts with clear governance and a coordinated strategy, as Susan rightfully highlighted. Now, Susan, let's explore how leaders can help employees navigate technology change through personalized support and training. How does the Forklift Archetypes framework help employees feel seen during tech transition? We'd like to just take a step back and really understand this framework. So please tell our audience what this framework is all about.
Thank you for asking. So this framework is one that comes from my books, One Dive Backwards. And the reason that I built it is called the four, as you said, the four Cliff archetypes. The reason that I built it is that I think people do understand the concept of being part of a community, a sense of belonging, of being like, I'm not the only one. And so when I created this four Cliff archetypes, the goal was to help people really like feel seen. So when people are adopting AI, they're not doing it all the same way. So the way that you adopt it versus the way I adopt it versus someone else is quite different. Some people are really into it, they'll jump straight in, and that's what I call, like, in the model, divers. Those folks are like, if there's a cliff to be jumped off of, they're jumping straight off of it.
Right.
And so often you'll find people who are early adopters of AI potentially fall into that bucket where you have no fear, you're willing to click some buttons, break a few things, and then learn that way. But that does not at all mean that everybody approaches it the same way. Not everyone is geared for this speed of change, for this amount of, like, although it's called non-code or non-technical, that doesn't mean that it is entirely easy for everybody. So there is a second group that I call the pathfinders, and these folks are a little bit more research oriented. So you're like, if you come across something, so you mentioned governance and stuff, these are the folks who are probably going to be more likely to be like, but how is this going to play out for our data? Is it secure? Who owns the intellectual property? So, that kind of question comes from the pathfinders. And then the third is they call the operators, and these are the folks who usually get into a place where they're implementing things quickly. And that means, you can talk about AI all day, you can read all of the headlines and the hypey stuff, but at the end of it, unless you're putting it to work on your actual stuff, it's
Right.
probably not going to happen. And so I would say for companies, maybe that role of the operator is actually pretty important, because they take the ideas from experimentation into actual functionality. And then the last one is a group that I call bridge builders, and the bridge builders are the ones who put the systems into place so that you're not doing the same thing over and over again. So like inside of AI, at the generative AI level, if you talk about it, people talk about prompts a lot, right? And you're like, oh, we need to write better prompts. We need to, have a bank of prompts. But that's not the end of it. Like that a prompt does not a system make.
Right.
It goes a little bit further than that. So if you find repetitive stuff that you're doing regularly, or if there's, a complex workflow, it makes sense to build it out into something systemic and then have that work over and over again. So I think from a leadership perspective, you need to think about it as there's not just one type of person. Instead, there's, at least four, in my opinion. I'm sure there are more, as we're only about 3 years into this thing.
Right.
And to your earlier point about, like, it's not going as fast as we thought it would. Like maybe in 2022, everybody was like, this is going to take 5 years. But, as I've been in the field, I'm thinking this is probably closer to like a 10-year transition, right? Because as we sit here at the 3-year point, we're probably 12% in Canada in terms of adoption, which I think is a little bit under what everybody would have expected with the hype. So yeah, I think taking it back to change management, seeing the individual and then training to the individual is probably how I would approach it.
That's a valuable perspective, Susan. Thank you for sharing that. And it really helps us understand how people respond to change and how it can significantly improve adoption and engagement. Um, Now let's discuss the growing AI adoption gap and what organizations can do to create more inclusive opportunities. Tell us what systemic factors drive the AI gender adoption gap and how could this affect executive wages?
Right. So I'm definitely of the thought that AI amplifies what already exists, right? And so if what already exists is just, wonderful things, it's going to be more wonderful things. And also the same for if there's a lot of chaos, if there's a lot of bias, if there's a lot of, inequity that's built into it, it's going to also scale, right? And so one of the things that comes to my mind straight away from an equitable perspective is that there's a statistic that women use AI about 25% less than men do. And to my mind, like, we're already in a place where we haven't quite closed the wage gap, from the first round. And now if we're going to scale it, and if you start thinking about who are the people who are in those roles which people say that AI will replace. So there's administrative roles, there's maybe junior communication roles, maybe there's like things like marketing interns, maybe there's people who entered data before or, manage those kind of jobs. And a lot of those jobs are the ones that are being predicted to like eventually be replaced by AI. And if you take a look at the type of demographic that exists inside of those roles, there's a good chance a lot of them are women.
Right.
And so where does that leave us, right? I mean, we're in a place where we're like, okay, so AI is going to take away jobs. The jobs that it's going to take away are being held by women. So what's the plan, right? And so I think more discussions, not only inside of enterprises, but like outside of that with, advocacy groups, with the government, with education. These are things that we need to start planning for.
Got it. No, that's an important point, and thank you for highlighting that, Susan, because inclusive AI adoption, it will really help ensure the technology benefits all employees and all future leaders. To all the listeners and entrepreneurs that are watching, letting fragmented, uncontrolled AI pilots run wild inside your firm is a massive threat to your operational margins. Susan and her elite consulting team at Northlight AI specialize in turning scattered digital pipelines into one coordinated corporate roadmap with the exact governance that your board expects, delivered in weeks, not quarters. Future proof your workforce literacy and secure your corporate structures today. Now we'll take a quick break, but don't go anywhere because when we return, we'll dive into how businesses can turn saved time into order value and amplify their operational impact with AI.
Hey, you think you know UPS? Yeah, that's us. Everybody knows that. You know what you didn't know? This. Okay, try to keep up. Ocean, us. Ground, rail, air, so us. Guess who? Us. Customs cleared, borders cleared, done. Us. Still with me? Wait for it. Boom. Us. Intelligent, automated, fulfillment. Us. Yep. Healthcare too. Digital your thing? Yeah. Well, book it, ship it, track it. You feeling me yet? Yep. That's all us. That's all UPS.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's explore how re-architecting saved commercial time can unlock real growth opportunities and give your teams a strategic bandwidth to innovate. Now, Susan, let's examine why saving time is only the beginning and how businesses can turn that time into greater value. Tell us, why is saving hours a baseline trap, and how should founders reinvest that time for growth?
That's a really good question, and I try, it's one of the hills that I will die on. I talk about it a lot in the book as well, which is that I think time saved is just table stakes. What's happening right now is people are like, oh, this particular task, for example, I don't know, preparing for a podcast would take me 3, 4, 5 hours in the past, and today maybe it's taking me 30 or 35 minutes. So those 4.5 hours that you've saved, it seems like, oh, this is great, we're doing it faster. But then, much like money, time has to be reinvested in order to make it actually grow, right? And so what are we doing with that 4.5 hours? Are we putting it into higher order work? Are we putting it into sort of like raising the profile of the brand, the company, the mission, the impact, and all of that, right? And so I definitely think that we have to start looking at second order benefits of how it is you're spending your time. And so some of the metrics that you could replace that with, instead of just saying I saved 100 hours or I saved 200 hours, some of the metrics that you could replace it with are like, did it mean that your speed to market was greater? Were you able to go to market a little bit faster? Did you reduce any mistakes in the process? Like, so did the quality get higher? Did you expand in some way into other areas? So, a wider offering. And so those are the types of actual metric, I think, which moves the needle of business. And those are the things that leaders really should be focusing on rather than getting hung up on. We saved a lot of time. And again, it may be unpopular opinion, but I think part of that time saved is also rest, right? I mean, maybe we don't need a 40-hour work week going forward. Maybe we need like a 4-day week, which I know that many companies have been talking about it, but really haven't made that progress. And the ones that have actually made the progress are still taking the 40 hours and then converting it into 4.5 days or 4 days or whatever. But I believe that much more thought has to be given into what happens after you save the time. How are we reinvesting it?
Right. That's a great takeaway there, Susan. And the real value, you're right, of automation, it comes from how businesses really reinvest the time that they gain. Now let's look at how AI and digital content can accelerate creative projects, including publishing and thought leadership. Susan, how did you leverage podcasts and AI workflows to publish your book in just 5 months?
Yes, it's one of my favorite stories. It's either that I'm completely crazy or I'm onto something. Let's hope it's the latter.
Yeah.
So at the end of December or in December last in 2025, I took on a challenge to record 25 podcasts over the course of 30 days, which I know crazy because like it is the busiest month of the year. Getting people coordinated, all of that was like a challenge. But what it did is it provided a container for me to like bring together ideas because I'd been thinking about writing this book for a while and I'd been sort of like pushing myself away from it because I was like, this is AI. Things are changing on a daily basis. So is there any point of writing a book if the book is going to get obsolete in 6 months, right? And then I realized that was the wrong way to think about it. And really, my messaging isn't about tools or models that are dropping. It's much more about like taking a look at it from a leadership and a
Right.
change perspective. And so I needed that container, even though, like I said, I do have a podcast on the subject and I could have easily drawn from it, but I was like, we need to be interviewing people specifically. So I pulled together 13 guests that I wanted to hear from, very much in the market who can, like, there were people from finance, there were people who are founders, people who, are operators, like we talked about in the model. And then I interviewed them, used those podcasts, those 25 episodes, pulled out the transcripts from them, which meant that essentially we had, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of words of interviews. And then using AI, I started to, when I say I used AI for a book, most people tend to think I used it to write. But that's just again scratching the surface, right? And so the real benefit, I think, was in being able to be like, oh, I spoke to you about this, and then I spoke to him about this. And so, what is there any crossovers? How does that strengthen the message? How does that feed into like the existing framework for the book? And so, I feel like in a non-AI world, I wrote another book before, and it took 3 or 3.5 years of actually writing and editing and changing and reviewing. And this time around, it's 5 months. So once again, back to that point about time saved, right?
Right.
And I think it was really, for me, mostly an experiment to see what was possible. People will simultaneously, as I'm releasing a book about how to get AI to help you, there's people talking about how perhaps this genre is dead, right? Maybe books are, at least nonfiction books that teach you something, are kind of dead because the AI models can teach you the same things. But I don't think so. I think when you actually get into the material that somebody creates it from conversations, there's personality in it, there's stories in it, there's detail in it, which will always be relevant, in my opinion.
That is an inspiring example, and it really proves that AI can help accelerate execution while really allowing creators to focus on ideas and expertise. This was a great conversation, Susan. Thank you for showing how AI can be adopted in so many meaningful ways for our listeners. As we wrap up, what is your key advice for executives to build real AI literacy this week?
Okay, for me, it's a really simple step. You got to use it yourself. You have to like get in there, put it to work on actual tasks rather than just, leadershipy things like getting, a couple of slides together or whatever. Go beyond that, like dig into the actual work that your people are doing and use AI for that. And then you'll start to see some of the challenges, some of the opportunities, some of the maybe benefits, which you really haven't fully understood because other people are doing the execution on your team.
Right. That is an exceptional reminder, really, that true successful comes from actively using technology rather than just talking about it, and that building communities of practice is the key to scale. Thank you so much, Susan, for being on the show with us and for sharing such great expertise and your
I
insights.
love it. I really enjoyed this chat. Time flew right by. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us again. And that was Susan Diaz from Northlight AI, a masterclass in migrating away from uncoordinated tech pilots to building structured roadmap governance, deploying the four Cliff archetypes to streamline workflows, education, and understanding how her brand new book is shielding corporate margins in 2026. Thank you for tuning to the podcast. Please be sure to subscribe and visit CanadianSME.ca for more resources. And to learn more about how you're supporting the ecosystem, please visit the Canadian SME Small Business Foundation at smefoundation.ca. A special thanks to our partners, UPS and ADP, for their ongoing commitment to empower Canadian small businesses across Canada.